In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Ironically, despite being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse world in the game. Entropy had a different layout, but was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played by a violin, a melody that started out sounding mournful, and then became... I guess I would call it distorted? It made me feel depressed and unnerved. Strangely, none of the levels from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mecha Godzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from Face. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy Ghidorah music, it was the password theme. The music change seemed to be intentional, because after the first 2 questions, the quiz started to take on a darker tone.
Do you like ice cream?
Yes. Weird face number 1.
Do you like clowns?
Yes. Weird face number 10.
Is time slipping through your fingers?
Yes. Weird face number 2.
Do you have any regrets?
Yes. Hurt.
Do some people deserve to die?
No. Weird face number 3.
Is it safe to go out at night?
Yes. Weird face number 5.
Do you find it hard to sleep at night?
Yes. Weird face number 9.
Have you ever killed anyone?
No. Weird face number 7.
Do you want to kill anyone?
No. Angry.
Are you actually accomplishing anything?
No. Weird face number 4.
Does life have any real meaning?
No. Love.
Do you like Mothra?
No. Maniacal. I knew that last one was going to be a gameplay related question, but I had no idea what the result would be. I answered honestly because, as I said before, I never liked Mothra. Nobody liked playing as Mothra in this game, and there was a good reason for that. Every other time Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back to the left corner of the screen, and she sucks at fighting because her attacks are so weak. The only benefit Mothra had was being able to fly over obstacles. So I answered no, and Face actually replied back to me, not only with the maniacal expression, but with text.
Too bad.
I was taken back to the map screen, and I was shocked to see that Godzilla and Anguirus had disappeared from the board, leaving only Mothra. Face had just fucked me over. Needless to say, I was pissed. But there wasn't anything I could do, and I'm willing to bet even if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyway. Face giveth, and face taketh away. I took a deep breath, and got ready to explore. There were 2 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one, which turned out to be a good choice. The first world ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately I got an eerie feeling. There was something about this level that just seemed off to me, even more than the previous ones. Perhaps it was the pitch black background. I've always been afraid of being in a forest at night. Something about all those trees makes me feel surrounded and vulnerable. And the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery. Being in control of the king of the monsters, I'd be able to handle just about anything in my way. But it wasn't like that with Mothra. No feeling of strength or security. I was just a weak, easily overwhelmed bug traversing into the unknown. The music had new instruments, sounding like woodwinds, followed by slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. It gave me this feeling that I was intruding into some dangerous place I really shouldn't have been. After a while, I encountered the first enemies of the stage. Or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them, and they ran away. I thought about shooting one with an I-beam to see what would happen, but it seemed wrong. These creatures were harmless. So I passed over them and continued through the level. About halfway through, I encountered groups of the deer-like animals, and also two new creatures. A sloth-like creature with a beak climbing on a tree, and hairy raptor-esque beasts that were preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures interact. I didn't feel like I was playing a video game, but rather that I was traveling through a forest in some other dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but they couldn't reach me when I was flying up high. After that, I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass or the TV screen. I chose the TV. What I got was not at all what I expected. When I started the level, the screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was the goofy Ghidorah music that used to play in the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this because it was just so strange. I also found it a bit spooky because I had a shirt that looked just like that when I was a kid. After starting the animation, I could go back to the board by pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect from these icons. I went to try an hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when an actual level came up. It was certainly an unorthodox looking level. All brown, with time measuring instruments floating in the air, and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen, and very early in the level I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game! And not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them. And the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, could now move. I took some damage, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass items. There were 3 of these. A blue hourglass that made time slow down and filled the level with enemies from the past, a red hourglass that made time speed up and filled the level with enemies from the future, and a green hourglass that set time to the normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As stated, the game started to slow down, and I saw the enemies from the past, which were 5 different types of prehistoric animals. I don't know much about prehistory, but I believe all of these enemies represent real animals. In the last segment, I encountered the red hourglass, and the enemies that must have been from the future. Now, whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of creatures that would actually exist thousands of years into Earth's future, I have no idea. But with that thought in mind, I found this particular segment to be very eerie, and it was made more tense because everything moved faster. One of the future enemies bore a striking resemblance to something I saw in a book once, called Trudon Man. Another looked like some kind of organic spaceship. There was only one of the 5th type of future creature, and when it appeared, all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle it. It could fly, but its sprite didn't actually move, and its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, it was surprisingly powerful, enough to be considered a mini-boss. After defeating it, it left a health power-up that restored the health and energy I had lost fighting it. It seemed I would need all the help I could get to beat this world with Mothra alone. After that stage, which I call the Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, the place looked grungy and inhospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer song. Listening to it made me feel like I had sniffed some toxic fumes myself, and it was messing with my head the whole time. While playing this level, I even felt like I was choking. The enemies all appeared to be mutated to some degree. Some were green mummies with bird skulls that jumped out of the waste to spit projectiles. There were also brownish cow skeleton monsters with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I even saw one of the deer from the forest. It was alone. and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of a barrel with an anteater-like tongue. I moved over to try to make it stop, but then this flock of skullbirds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was scared by this and ended up running off the ground into the toxic waste. I felt bad for it. One of the birds bit me, but I regained health quick from killing all of them. They were rather weak. I pressed onward. Of all the levels in Entropy, this was probably the most normal, in that there was little deviance from the move forward smash things formula in the original game. I encountered more creatures through the level, like tentacled blobs, and some kind of deformed thing with human-like teeth. I didn't feel like provoking them, so I kept on flying near the top of the screen. Even so, I still had to deal with the occasional flock of skullbirds. At the end of the level was a large, bluish-green lake, and there I encountered another mini-boss. Some kind of a monster with a long neck and a whale skull. It attacked with a mouth projectile and trying to charge me. It could also go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat than the boss from the Time Warp, and it had a lot of health because it must have taken me 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a really loud noise when it died, and then sank back into the water as I left the screen. Back on the board, I went to the nearest level icon I hadn't seen yet, which was a white tree. As I guessed, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. It was a gentle, calm song. It almost sounded romantic. It was quite stress-relieving, and the forest itself looked much less ominous covered in snow. I traveled through the first segment for 4 minutes, enjoying the atmosphere, when suddenly I realized something. I hadn't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where were all the animals? Soon after, the next segment started. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was likely another one of those. But then, I heard something familiar. It was the 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging from the blackish blue tone of their skin, they had all frozen to death. On closer inspection, some were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state. And sure enough, I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this thing had white fur and was more of a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to at least see something alive. However, it didn't stay that way for too long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed that something was still alive, came rushing in from the right side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance, as one of the raptors immediately lunged at it and ripped open its back legs. These winter raptors acted far different from their temperate relatives. While the other raptors only attacked while hunting prey or when provoked, the winter raptors seemed to have all gone insane. They attacked everything in sight, and one was even running back and forth clawing at nothing. Even the noises they made sounded different, more high-pitched and enraged. As I left this second segment, I even saw 2 raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had been blinded in one eye. I took a screenshot, but I didn't stay to see who won the fight. I only had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board screen. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty grassy plain, with a bright grey moon in the sky. The pleasant music of Winter Forest Part 1 returned, and immediately I started to feel dread. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake. And then the moon moved down from the sky and began to hatch like an egg. When it did, a curled up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves quickly disintegrated. I heard a splash when it hit the water, then a moment of silence. Then the screen began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus I was introduced to a monster I call the Moon Beast. This was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight. And it was the most difficult fight yet. Stronger than any of the previous bosses, this creature would have been hard to take down with Godzilla, and with Mothra it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I would consider myself fortunate that the beast lacked any attacks like Gigan's Saw, because if it had, I never would have won this. I barely had 3 bars of health when I killed this abomination. But what happened afterward is hardly what I could call a reward. This is going to sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. The game made this level from one of my memories. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems I have to get it off my chest now. This is a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the important parts because I don't like bringing this experience back into my head unless I really have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered from some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still, and her face would instantly lose any expressions she had before. She would speak very clearly, without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling and sometimes bury her face in her hands, and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave me in words, and I won't try. You had to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person, and I cared about her dearly. We liked to hang out in a field at night and look up at the stars. But one night, she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and ran right into traffic. I tried to stop her, but I was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. That sight has always haunted me. I know that the game knows about this because, after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened.
Kill yourself. Kill yourself. Kill.